Hi everyone. Today we are going to learn about a very important philosophical work written by Rene Descartes, and it is known as the Preface to the Reader from his book Meditations on First Philosophy. So this chapter comes under the fourth module of Calicut University's AEC. So, before we begin, let me ask you a question. Have you ever doubted something you believe to be true? Maybe you thought you saw a friend in a distance, and when you get closer, you realize that it was a stranger. Or maybe you believed a rumor, and that turned out to be a false one. So, this is exactly what Rene Descartes wanted to explore in this chapter. How do we know if what we believe is actually true? So, let's begin by talking about the man behind the work, Rene Descartes. So, he was a French philosopher, he was a mathematician as well as a scientist, and he was often called as the father of modern philosophy. Rene Descartes is famous for a very important statement, that is cogito ergo sum, which means I think therefore I am. This idea changed the way people understood knowledge and existence, which means the ultimate basis of our existence lies in our mind, the way we think. So, in his book, The Meditations on First Philosophy, it is one of the most important works of philosophy. So, it was published in 1641 and it is a philosophical treatise. So, what do you mean by a philosophical treatise? A philosophical treatise means a carefully written and well structured work that explores deep philosophical ideas about knowledge, reality, and doubt. So, here in this chapter, we can see that there are so many questions that are asked by Rene Descartes regarding knowledge, existence, methodical doubt, nature of mind, and ultimately the existence of God. So, he doubts everything, and in this slide you can see that Rene Descartes wrote the Meditations on First Philosophy, including 6 meditations, and each of them are systematically examining the foundations of human knowledge. What is human knowledge? What is the true knowledge? And what is the nature of reality? Do God exist? And what is the basis of that belief? And he also introduces a new method called methodical doubt, which means that you have to question everything in order to find out the absolute truth, in order to find out what is absolute certain. So, in this book, in Meditations on First Philosophy, the word meditation needs special attention because the word meditation is usually connected with religious or spiritual realms. But here, the word meditation refers to a deep, reflective, philosophical inquiry. It has nothing to do with the religious or spiritual meditation. It is a kind of a thinking. It is kind of critical analysis. So let's focus on the major themes of the book. So the first one is methodic doubt and the cogito, which means I think, therefore I am. So Descartes moves away from uncertain beliefs and tries to find the real knowledge. What is the real knowledge? That's he is searching for. So he introduces methodical doubt, in which He questions everything in order to find the absolute meaning, or in order to find the absolute certainty or truth. And he's going for a metaphysical inquiry. What do you mean by metaphysical inquiry? He explores the nature of reality and existence. So in the first theme, we can see that methodical doubt and cogito. So Descartes begins by doubting everything, even our senses. And he reaches that one certainty. Ultimately, he reaches one truth. And that truth is, if he's having some doubts, it means that he is thinking. And if he is thinking, it means that he is existing. So ultimately, the basis or the foundation of one's existence lies upon its doubt, lies upon its thinking capabilities. That's what he is saying. And in the second part, we can see the nature of mind. He is searching for the nature of mind. He argues that the mind is a thinking thing and it is distinct, it is a separate thing from our body. According to his opinion, mind and body are different, and he introduces the idea of dualism. And he believes that the knowledge of our mind is more absolute than the knowledge we gain from the physical world. So according to him, we have to trust upon our thinking capabilities. Whatever we conceive through our perceptions, or whatever we conceive through our five senses, are not enough, are not well enough. That's what he said. And again he goes on discussing about God's existence, and he uses reason to argue that God exists, in which he says that there are two main arguments. The first one is trademark argument, and the second one is ontological argument. So in the first one, the trademark argument, we can see that he says that God is a perfect being. All of us consider God as a perfect being. And what about us, the human beings? We, the human beings, are not perfect, completely perfect. We are not completely perfect. We are imperfect. So, how can the idea of a perfect being could be aroused in the minds of an imperfect being like ourselves? So, he is saying that the idea of God being a perfect being must be instilled in our mind, or must be placed in our mind by God himself or herself. And he again says that ontological argument. What do you mean by ontological argument? He is saying that, so already we have conceived God as a perfect being. So someone is being perfect means they are existing. So we cannot say that someone is not existing and they are perfect. So if we are conceiving, or if we are agreeing that God is a perfect being, which means that God must be existing there. It is a necessity. And in the fourth portion, he says, he argues that actually the God, being the perfect entity, would not deceive him about the existence of the external world. Whatever the nature of the external world or the reality, the God would never deceive him, because they are the perfect creatures. The perfect creatures or the perfect beings never ever deceive anyone. And he concludes that the material things exist, but they are separate from our mind, and it's up to us to choose between the mind and the material world. And he finally says that we are having dualism. which means our body and our mind are two different creations, are two different things. So our body operates in the physical world, whereas our mind is operating in a rational world, and it is non-material as well. That's what he's saying. Now let's move on to the preface of the reader, the purpose. So the preface to the reader, it serves as an introduction to his book Meditations, in which Rene Descartes explains why he wrote the book and how he intends the reader to approach it. So while discussing this, it's important that he's giving justification. He's giving justification for the book. Descartes states that his work aims to provide a new philosophical foundation. So in the beginning, the philosophers were mostly following Aristotelian philosophy or Aristotelianism. Here, our writer, Rene Descartes, tries to provide a new philosophical foundation with his work. The second one is addressing skepticism. We all know skepticism is somehow connected with scientific temper. So similarly, he is also asking everyone to be skeptical. And at the same time, he says that some of his arguments, like the existence of God and all, may be controversial. But he insists that questioning established beliefs is necessary for gaining true knowledge. So questioning or asking questions to everything is a good habit through which we can gain good knowledge. That's what he's saying. The third is the role of the church. And he assures the readers that his work is anyhow connected with the Christian teachings. And he even seeking approval from the theologians in order to ensure that his arguments which he has proposed in the book do not contradict any of the religious doctrine. And anyway, he is also introducing another theme that is called as the method of inquiry. And he emphasizes the method of doubt, the method of radical doubt. Anyway, let's take a closer look at how Descartes applies his method of doubt. So first thing, he begins by doubting everything, and he asks, what if life is like a dream and all. Then finally he realizes that if I doubt, I must exist. So that is the kind of methodical doubt he is following. And he ensures that, or he assures that the methodical doubt is important if we want to acquire true knowledge. So this preface is acting as a guide for the readers like us by setting a stage for the meditations and explaining why Rene Descartes undertook this philosophical journey. So every writer will be having some kind of inspiration to write a book. Similarly, this preface to the reader will tell you what are the inspirations under which our writer Rene Descartes wrote this book called Meditations on First Philosophy. So let's have a structure of the preface. So in the first position we have the justification for the meditations, in which he is explaining why questioning is very much important when we want to seek knowledge. And he also says that he's aiming to rebuild a philosophy on a secure foundation rather than something like Aristotelianism. And he's then appealing to scholars, like he is encouraging the philosophers to critically engage with his ideas. He's saying that I'm asking you to question. Even you can question whatever arguments I have stated in this book. You're open and you can question. And he invites feedbacks and debate to refine his arguments. He is saying that I'm not a perfect human being, I'm an imperfect being. So if you have some controversial or opposite arguments, if you have some doubts, clear it. And you are open to critically engage with my ideas. If you're finding anything wrong, you are open to talk about it. So he's actually appealing to the scholars. And then he is aligning with the religious thought. He assures the readers that his ideas definitely supporting the Christian beliefs. And he also distinguishes between the faith-based knowledge and rational inquiry. He actually makes a point by differentiating between what is faith-based knowledge and what is rational inquiry. So it's time for us to move on to the question answers now. The first question, describe the purpose of Rene Descartes' Preface to the reader. How does he justify his method of doubt as a foundation for philosophical inquiry? So in this question they are asking us to describe the purpose of the preface to the reader. So first of all, the purpose of Descartes' preface to the reader is to explain the purpose of writing the book called Meditations on First Philosophy. So he has already written a book named Meditations on First Philosophy. So he wanted to convey why the reader has to read it, or what is the purpose of writing this book. So in order to explain the purpose of writing the Meditations on First Philosophy, Rene Descartes wrote the preface to the reader. And he aims to establish a firm foundation for true knowledge. And he encourages critical thinking, rational inquiry. It challenges traditional beliefs and assumptions. And again, there is a justification of the method of doubt. Rene Descartes questions everything, whatever he used to believe as true. And he recognizes that the senses and traditions can be sometimes misleading. We might be blindly following some passion or a tradition, but in the immediate future, it might turn to something that is misleading. And again, he uses a systematic doubt to eliminate falsehoods. And he seeks to discover a clear and certain knowledge. Again, he arrives at the sentence cogito ergo sum, which means I think, therefore I am. Now the second question, describe the method of radical doubt used by Descartes. So what is radical doubt? So first of all, Descartes begins by doubting everything, all his beliefs, including what he learns from his senses. Then he asks, what if life is just a dream? How can we be sure we are awake? Then he imagines a powerful demon who tricks him into believing false things. And he imagines that there is an evil demon and that is tricking him to believe in a false reality. And then he finally realizes that even if I doubt, I must exist to doubt. And this leads him to his famous conclusion that cogito ergo sum, which means I think therefore I am. So no matter how much he doubts, the fact that he is thinking proves that he is existing. So thinking is presented as a basic necessity for one to exist. That is the idea we receive from this chapter. The next question is to interpret the meaning of the phrase cogito ergo sum. So, as I already told you, cogito ergo sum is a Latin word which means I think, therefore I am. And this is Rene Descartes' most famous idea. But what does this mean? It means thinking proves that a person exists. Even if everything else is false, the act of thinking is real. So ultimately, the only thing that is true in the world is thinking. And this is the first clear and certain truth that Descartes finds through this writing. And this statement became foundation of modern philosophy as well. Okay, so he doubted everything, and finally he comes to a conclusion that his mind is in the existence because he's thinking, and his body is in the external world, physical world, and his body is completely different from his brain, and all these things he is understanding. Next question is to summarize the main objections to Descartes' work. So, not everyone agreed with Descartes. So, as usual, whatever we do, there will be different kinds of opinions arising in a society. Similarly, even though Descartes wrote this book, not everyone agreed with him. So, there are some criticisms of his ideas, like the problem of the external world. So, it means, does Descartes really prove that the world exists? The question is there. Is there a real existing world? And the next one is circular reasoning, which means Cartesian circle. Here, Descartes uses God to prove the truth, but also uses truth to prove the God, which means he says that if God is a perfect being, then he must exist. Then he says that if something is existing, it should be perfective. So it is known as Cartesian cycle. It comes in a logical loop. It creates a logical loop. The next thing is mind-body problem. And he introduces a dualism critique. And Descartes claims that the mind and body are separate substances. And this raises questions. How do they interact? If mind and body are two separate beings, how do they interact? And modern science supports a strong connection between brain and consciousness. Even though Descartes says that mind and body are two different things, the modern science never approves that. The modern science says that there is a connection between your body and your mind, and it is proven scientifically. And the fourth one is skepticism versus practicality. So, anyway, radical doubt is impractical for everyday life. We have other things to do as well, right? And someone is arguing that doubting everything is excessive and unrealistic. So, it is the opinion of so many people around him. And the fifth one is alternative views on knowledge. So, the later philosophers like Locke, Hume, etc. argued that experience, not reason alone, is the foundation of knowledge. So, here we can see that the empiricism is challenging Descartes' rationalistic approach. So, he is saying that experience, not reason, is the foundation of knowledge. So, Descartes said that reason is the foundation of knowledge. But here we are saying that experience is the foundation of knowledge. So, these kinds of objections led to further debates in the philosophy as well. Thank you and have a nice day.